Hi guys. For our English language arts lesson this week, we're going to combine what we have learned for a reading aspect or a reading skill of compare and contrast with some writing skills. I'm going to read two books to you, two picture books, and we are going to go through a graphic organizer together, and I'm going to take you through the graphic organizer, through the directions for writing, and then show you an example writing, and then give you the opportunity to create your own writing, either based on the two books I'm sharing with you, or maybe you might want to do it based on a different book that you have at home that you'd like to read. The first book that I'm going to read to you is called The Story of Ruby Bridges. You may have heard of this story in the past or something similar to this. There is quite a few books about her out there, and she is a real person, and I'm going to go ahead and read this story to you, and then I'm going to read another book that has a similar theme to it, and then we're going to compare and contrast the two girls along with making some comparisons with ourselves. So this is The Story of Ruby Bridges. I will read it and I will share pictures with you. Ruby Bridges was born in a small cabin near Tylerton, Mississippi. We were very poor, very, very poor, Ruby said. My daddy worked picking crops. We just barely got by. There were times when we didn't have much to eat. The people who owned the land were bringing in machines to pick the crops, so my daddy lost his job, and that's when we had to move. I remember us leaving. I was 4, I think. So this is the first picture, and then it just continues on the next page. So it's a picture of the car. In 1957, the family moved to New Orleans. Ruby's father became a janitor. Her mother took care of the children during the day. After they were tucked in bed, Ruby's mother went to work scrubbing floors in a bank. Every Sunday, the family went to church. We wanted our children to be near God's Spirit, Ruby's mother said. We wanted them to start feeling close to Him from the very start. So here's one side of the picture. And then Ruby's mom tucking them in for bed. At that time, black children and white children went to separate schools in New Orleans. The black children were not able to receive the same education as the white children. It wasn't fair, and it was against the nation's laws. In 1960, a judge ordered 4 black girls to go to 2 white elementary schools. 3 of the girls were sent to McDonough 19. 6-year-old Ruby Bridges was sent to 1st grade in the William Frantz Elementary School. So here's that picture. And then the other side. Ruby's parents were proud that their daughter had been chosen to take part in an important event in American history. They went to church. We sat there and we prayed, Ruby's mother said, that we'd all be strong and we'd have courage and we'd get through any trouble. And Ruby would be a good girl, and she'd hold her head up high and be a credit to her own people and a credit to all the American people. We prayed long and we prayed hard. So here's the picture. On Ruby's first day, a large crowd of angry white people gathered outside the Frantz Elementary School. The people carried signs that said they didn't want black children in a white school. People called Ruby names. Some wanted to hurt her. The city and state police did not help Ruby. The President of the United States ordered federal marshals to walk with Ruby into the school building. The marshals carried guns. So you can see the crowds that she's walking through are screaming at her. And this is a picture of her walking through them. And the whole page all together. Every day for weeks that turned into months, Ruby experienced that kind of school day. She walked to the France school surrounded by marshals, wearing a clean dress and a bow in her hair and carrying her lunch pail. Ruby walked slowly for the first few blocks. As Ruby approached the school, she saw a crowd of people marching up and down the street. Men and women and children shouted at her. They pushed toward her. The marshals kept them from Ruby by threatening to arrest them. Ruby would hurry through the crowd and not say, not say a word. The white people in the neighborhood would not send their children to school. When Ruby got inside the building, she was all alone except for her teacher, Miss Hurley. Excuse me. There were no other children to keep Ruby company, to play with and learn with, to eat lunch with. But every day, Ruby went into the classroom with a big smile on her face, ready to get down to the business of learning. She was polite and she worked well at her desk, Miss Hurley said. She enjoyed her time there. She didn't seem nervous or anxious or irritable or scared. She seemed as normal and relaxed as any child I've ever taught. So Ruby began learning how to read and write in an empty classroom, an empty building. So this is a picture of her by herself. Can you imagine being all by yourself in that classroom? Sometimes I'd look at her and wonder how she did it, said Miss Hurley, how she went by those mobs and sat here all by herself and yet seemed so relaxed and comfortable. Miss Hurley would question Ruby in order to find out if the girl was really nervous and afraid, even though she seemed so calm and confident. But Ruby kept saying she was doing fine. The teacher decided to wait and see if Ruby would keep on being so relaxed and hopeful, or if she'd gradually begin to wear down, or even decide that she no longer wanted to go to school. Here's the picture. And then all together. Then one morning, something happened. Miss Hurley stood by a window in her classroom as she usually did, watching Ruby walk toward the school. Suddenly, Ruby stopped right in front of the mob of howling and screaming people. She stood there facing all those men and women. She seemed to be talking to them. Miss Hurley saw Ruby's lips moving and wondered what Ruby could be saying. The crowd seemed ready to kill her. The marshals were frightened. They tried to persuade Ruby to move along. They tried to hurry her into the school, but Ruby wouldn't budge. Then Ruby stopped talking and walked into school. So here she is. And here is the crowd screaming at her. When she went into the classroom, Miss Hurley asked her what happened. Miss Hurley told Ruby that she'd been watching and that she was surprised when Ruby stopped and talked with the people in the mob. Ruby became irritated. "I didn't stop and talk with them," she said. "Ruby, I saw you talking," Miss Hurley said. "I saw your lips moving." "I wasn't talking," said Ruby. "I was praying. I was praying for them." Every morning, Ruby had stopped a few blocks away from school to say a prayer for the people who hated her. This morning, she forgot until she was already in the middle of the angry mob. When school was over for the day, Ruby hurried through the mob as usual. After she walked a few blocks and the crowd was behind her, Ruby said the prayer she repeated twice a day, before and after school. "Please try to forgive those people, because even if they say those bad things, they don't know what they're doing, so you could forgive them." just like you did those folks a long time ago when they said terrible things about you. The end of the book kind of gives you a little what happened after. Later that year, 2 white boys joined Ruby at the France Elementary School. Their parents were tired of seeing the boys get into mischief around the house when they could have been in school and learning. The mob became very angry when the first white boys went back to school, but those boys were soon joined by other children. We've been sitting back and letting our children get cheated out of an education because some people have tried to take the law into their own hands, one parent said. It's time for us to fight for the side of the law and for our children's right to go to a school and get their education. They all did get their education, Ruby and a growing number of boys and girls who went to school with her. By the time Ruby was in the 2nd grade, the mobs had given up their struggle to scare Ruby and defeat the federal judge's order that New Orleans schools be desegregated so that children of all races might be in the same classroom. Year after year, Ruby went to the France school. She graduated from it, then went on to graduate from high school. Ruby Bridges is married to a building contractor and has 4 sons who attend school within the New Orleans public school system. Now she's a successful businesswoman, and she has created the Ruby Bridges Educational Foundation for the purpose of increasing parental involvement in schools. So that story was about Ruby Bridges, and this was a true story. Now I'm going to read you a story that is a fictional story, has a made-up character, and this story is called Amazing Grace. And after I read this story, you'll probably start to see a theme. Amazing Grace. Grace was a girl who loved stories. She didn't mind if they were read to her or told to her or made up in her own head. She didn't care if they were in books or movies or out of Nana's long memory. Grace just loved stories. After she had heard them, and sometimes while they were still going on, Grace would act them out, and she always gave herself the most exciting part. So here's Grace and Grandma, or Grace and Nana, and her acting out. Oops. Grace went into battle of Joan of Arc and wove a wicked web as Anansi the spider. So some examples of what she did when she was acting things out. She hid inside the wooden horse at the gates of Troy. She went exploring for lost kingdoms. She sailed the 7 seas with a peg leg and a parrot. She was Hiawatha sitting by the shining big sea water, and Mowgli in the backyard jungle. Most of all, Grace loved to act out adventure stories and fairy tales. When there was no one else around, Grace played all the parts herself. She set out to seek her fortune with no companion but her trusty cat, and found a city with streets paved in gold. Or she was Aladdin rubbing his magic lamp to make the genie appear. Sometimes she could get Ma and Nana to join in when they weren't too busy. Then she was Dr. Grace and their lives were in her hands. One day, Grace's teacher said they would do the play Peter Pan. Grace knew who she wanted to be. When she raised her hand, Raj said, "You can't be Peter. That's a boy's name." But Grace kept her hand up. "You can't be Peter Pan," whispered Natalie. "He isn't black." But Grace kept her hand up. All right, said the teacher. Lots of you want to be Peter Pan, so we'll have auditions next week to choose parts. She gave them the words to learn. When Grace got home, she seemed sad. What's the matter? Asked Ma. Raj said I can't be Peter Pan because I'm a girl. That just shows what Raj knows, said Ma. A girl can be Peter Pan if she wants to. Grace cheered up. Then later she remembered something else. Natalie says I can't be Peter Pan because I'm black, she said. Ma looked angry, but before she could speak, Nana said, it seems that Natalie is another one who don't know anything. You can be anything you want, Grace, if you put your mind to it. On Saturday, Nana told Grace they were going out. In the afternoon, they caught a bus and train into town. Nana took Grace to a grand theater. The sign outside read Rosalie Wilkins and Romeo and Juliet in sparkling lights. Are we going to the ballet, Nana? Asked Grace. We are, honey, but first I want you to look at this picture. Grace looked up and saw a beautiful young ballerina in a tutu. Above the dancer it said, Stunning New Juliet. That one is little Rosalie from back home in Trinidad, said Nana. Her granny and me, we grew up together on the island. She's always asking me, do I want tickets to see her Rosalie dance? So this time I said yes. After the ballet, Grace played the part of Juliet, dancing around her room in her imaginary tutu. I can be anything I want, she thought. On Monday, the class met for auditions to choose who was best for each part. When it was Grace's turn to be Peter, she knew exactly what to do and all the words to say. She had been Peter Pan all weekend. She took a deep breath and imagined herself flying. When it came time to vote, the class chose Raj to be Captain Hook and Natalie to be Wendy. There was no doubt who would be Peter Pan. Everyone voted for Grace. You were fantastic, whispered Natalie. The play was a big success, and Grace was an amazing Peter Pan. After it was all over, she said, I feel as if I could fly all the way home. You probably could, said Ma. Yes, said Nana. If Grace put her mind to it, she can do anything she wants. So that was Amazing Grace. Now I want you to take a minute and think back to our lesson on theme. And theme is the message the author wants you to take away from reading the book. I want you to also take what you've learned with comparing and contrasting and thinking about what's similar and what's different between the text that we read. And I want you to put it all together. I want you to pause the video in a second, and I want you to think about what theme the two books have in common. So I want you to hit pause right now, think about it, and then hit play again. So hopefully you have thought of a theme that these two books have in common. I want to share the theme that I came up with after reading these two books, and your theme might be similar or you might have a completely different theme. The theme that I decided was very similar in these two books is You can do it if you put your mind to it. With Ruby Bridges, she put her mind to attending school every day, regardless of what people were yelling at her, threatening her, shouting at her. She didn't have any company in the school, yet she was determined to continue going to school. So she put her mind to it and she did it. She continued on, and eventually people settled down and other kids joined her. Grace, she had it in her head she was going to be Peter Pan. So she put her mind to it and she did it. She practiced and she practiced, even though people told her she couldn't do it. She still did it. So both of these, in my opinion, have the theme, if you want to do it, you can do it. If you put your mind to it, you can get it done. So maybe your theme was similar, maybe you had a different theme. I'd love to hear about it. In the next video, we're going to take another English language arts skill of compare and contrast. So we're going to take it one step further and use it in the writing process. So either when you get done with this video, you can push play on the next one, or maybe a different day you'll want to push play. I'm thinking you might have to go back and rewatch parts of this video or rewatch it a second time to hear the stories a second time in order to help you with the writing. But that's okay because we love to listen to picture books.